Hey y'all, I'm practitioner Shelley Walker, and it is such a joy to be with you today. Reverend Shannon sends her big love to you today. And boy, we have some big things to talk about today. You know, I was meditating a couple of weeks ago, and Spirit says to me, does Spirit talk to you sometimes? You hear it like in a different part of your brain from where you hear regular words? Oh, just me. Okay. So I'm meditating the other day, and Spirit says, hey, Shelley, you have that talk in a couple of weeks? I said, yes. And Spirit says, you're going to change your talk title. And I say, oh, what are we doing, God? And Spirit says, you're going to talk about money. And I said, oh, I love talking about money. Let's talk about money. And Spirit says, wait, that's not it. You're going to talk about power. And I said, ooh, now we're getting somewhere. And Spirit says, and you're going to talk about sex. And I said, excuse me? Y'all, I grew up in the South. There are two things you do not talk about in public, especially at church. And those two things are money and sex. Are you kidding me? I said, God, I don't think so. And God said, yes, here we go. And I said, my 17-year-old is sitting on the front row. And my two adult children are right here. And God says, let's go. So we're going to do this, y'all. So here's my invitation for us today. We have some big concepts that we're going to cover today. Things that mess with our concepts of who we know ourselves to be and what safety is and all of those things. And so here's my invitation, is that if you hear something that you feel challenged by, I invite you to stay in that place for a while. Ask yourself, stay curious. Ask yourself, why am I challenged by this idea? Could it be true? If it is true, what would that mean, right? So I invite us all to stay curious as we take this little journey together today. Spirit had quite a ride in store for us today. You ready? Let's jump in. Money, sex, and power. Woo! So those of you who have taken financial freedom class learned that the highest purpose of money is love. Very good. The highest purpose of money is love. The reason that the highest purpose of money is love is because money serves to keep us engaged with each other. If it weren't for money, how many of us would be living on a cage in a mountain? A cave in a mountain, or in a little cove at the coast, all by ourselves, maybe with one or two other people doing our own thing. Money serves to keep us engaged with each other so we can grow, so we can come to know more, understand more, live more about love. So you could say that the highest purpose of sex is love. So does that mean that the highest purpose of power is love? We're going to talk about this. These three concepts, money, sex, and power, are all inextricably intertwined with each other and with our self-esteem. How we feel about ourselves directly impacts how we do sexual relationships and how we do our relationship with money. How we feel about ourselves directly impacts how we deal with those that we perceive to have more power than us or less power than us. Our self-esteem is inextricably intertwined with all of this. Money, sex, power, self-esteem, self-worth, safety. It all has a home in our bodies, in our first and second chakra. That's why we did this beautiful Om meditation today. Thank you, Brian Harris. To ground ourselves in our bodies, because Lord, what kind of witch's brew is that? Like just sitting there in our gut, right? These big concepts. It's messy, it's intertwined, it's big, and it's holy. All of it. Money is holy. Sex is holy. Power is holy. Let's talk about it, y'all. Let's talk about the word power. The word power comes from the Latin and Old French roots, meaning to be able. When we are empowered, we are able to do something. When we feel powerless, we don't feel that we can affect change. We don't feel able to do something. So power has a deep root in the word able. Do you know what the definition of able is? Having sufficient means. Having the resources to do something. Resources like money. So this idea of sufficiency is intimately tied up in the concepts of both power and money. Sufficiency. A little while ago, I decided to take a journey for myself about this concept of sufficiency. I didn't tell any of y'all about it. I didn't even tell my husband. This is the first he's hearing this. I personally decided to do some work with this concept of enough, sufficiency. What would it look like to not just have enough, but to deeply embody and experience the concept of enough? What does it mean to have the experience of enough money, enough love, enough food, enough time, just enough? What would that look like for me? It's been an interesting experiment because on the one hand, exploring the concept of enough food has taken me on a really beautiful journey with my body that has brought me to a beautiful place of trust in myself. You know, exploring this idea of enough money has brought me into a beautiful place of trust in my husband, in our business, in spirit, working as our business. It's been really beautiful. On the other hand, there's some things I've had enough of. I have had enough, for example, of people politicizing public health. I've had enough of racism and intolerance. Enough. I've had enough. I have nothing left to give for people who promote hate, whether it's consciously or through ignorance. I've had enough. So this journey of enoughness has taken me to places I didn't expect it to. It's been really interesting. Fascinatingly, the word enough, did you know I took like 12 years of Latin? I love this stuff. This is the last one I'm going to do today, though, I promise. The word enough comes from a combination of two words that means to attain together. Enough means to attain together. So even the concept of enough isn't something that happens in a vacuum. It happens in relationship to others. It's all about love. I want to draw a line for you here between money, sex, and power and the sacredness that is spirit. Did you hear Reverend Shannon's talk a couple of weeks ago when she so beautifully spoke about reclaiming the word God, or whatever the words are that trigger you, push your buttons? Well, if you haven't heard it yet, I highly encourage you to go to our YouTube channel and look up Reclaiming That Three-Letter Word. It's a fantastic talk. And while you're there, while you're listening to this talk, I invite you to not only think about your thoughts and feelings about the word God, but think about power. Brian Harris just taught us that there is one power in and through and as everything, including you and in me, one power. Whatever name you give it, there's one power. If you have any stuff around the word power, then you have stuff with God. There can't be one power that is God, that is in you, that is living you. You can't be that and be afraid of power at the same time. Take a breath. When I'm teaching classes or workshops about money, every single time, people come in with dueling beliefs. On the one hand, they deeply believe they want more money. They want wealth, whatever wealth means to them. They want more. On the other hand, they often have these ideas about people who already have more, that these people are greedy or they're destroying the earth or that money is the root of evil or all kinds of thoughts and judgments about the 1%, right? Here's the thing. You join a class because you want more prosperity, whatever that more means for you, but you despise those who have more. Do you see the conflict that you're setting up for yourself? We have a saying around here that the universe always says yes. What is the universe supposed to say yes to? Right? If you believe that you are a good person, most people have an inherent belief that they are good people. If you believe that and you believe that people with money are bad, you can't have money. Right? Because your concept of yourself is what is directing your financial journey. This kind of confusion, by the way, is A, very common, B, completely understandable, and C, super detrimental to building a healthy financial life. You cannot desire more money and despise those who have more money at the same time. In the same way, you cannot wish to empower yourself and despise those who are in power at the same time. Now, I want to be very, very clear. Is there systemic abuse of power in our world that we all are working to dismantle? Yes, absolutely. And that is not the conversation we're having here today. Today, we're talking about personal power, personal empowerment. So, the takeaway here is you cannot claim your own power until you are willing to be powerful, to be one of those people, until you can identify as powerful. What this means is whatever stuff you have about power, about people in power, whatever that stuff is, you get to stop projecting that out here and you get to start doing your work in here. Befriend the concept of power. Ernest Holmes said, always remember this. Life is from within outward and never from without inward. You are the center of power in your own life. You are the center of power in your own life. So in order to regain mastery over your life, in order to be that center of power in your own life, all you have to do is do some work around your beliefs around power. How do we do this? Off the top of my head, you can add a time of contemplation to your spiritual practice for a month. Just think about the word power. See what comes up for you. Journal about that. Think about people in your life who you perceive as powerful. Think about people in your life who you perceive as powerless. What is that about? What in you is projecting that onto the people around you, right? You get to do your own work. Here's one. Remember times in your life when you felt powerful. Remember times in your life when you felt powerless. Tell those stories one more time. One more time. Tell it to a therapist or a practitioner or a good friend over a cup of tea. Tell that story and then ask yourself, if you have a story of powerlessness in your life, ask yourself this question. Does having this experience with this person make it true of all people? Have you told yourself a story that all powerful people are bad because one powerful person hurt you? That's something we humans do. I learned that that's not a Shelley condition, that's a human condition, so I thought it might be your condition too sometimes. I call it catastrophizing, right? One bad thing happens, and I suddenly give that meaning to a whole swath of things. I catastrophize it, right? Don't we do that as humans? And it's okay. But what that does is that keeps us in a place of disempowerment. It's interesting to me how our experience of life gets warped through the lens of our stories. The Bulgarian writer Maria Popova said, the stories we tell ourselves about our public past shape how we interpret and respond to and show up for the present. The stories we tell ourselves about our private past shape how we come to see our personhood and who we ultimately become. The thin line between agency and victimhood is drawn in how we tell those stories. The line between agency and victimhood is drawn by how we tell our stories about the past. And that line has a name, and it's empowerment. And always, not always, but often, that lack of empowerment stems from the story we're telling ourselves about a situation. I can't tell you how many times I have felt powerless in a situation, and I have gone to someone and said, I don't know what to do here. And they have said, okay, give me 3 ideas of what you could do. And when you suddenly are looking for where you are empowered, that powerlessness dissipates. It depends on what story you're telling yourself. We are right smack dab in the middle of Hispanic Heritage Month, or Latinx Heritage Month, as some are beginning to call it. And I wanted to take this opportunity to tell you a little story about one of my very favorite writers. His name was Gabrielle Garcia Marquez. Some of you are already nodding. Your favorite too, huh? This Colombian journalist and writer was one of the most influential writers of the 20th century, a Nobel Prize winner for literature, who wrote Love in the Time of Cholera, yes, and 100 Years of Solitude, and so much more. He was such a true genius of a man. He wrote magical realism, and it is incredible. If you haven't read any of his books, I recommend it. In 2003, he wrote a piece for The New Yorker in which he told the tale of the time when he published his first story. At the time, he was an impoverished student, and he had just read Kafka's The Metamorphosis for the first time. Do you remember reading The Metamorphosis for the first time? It's mind-blowing in every way. So Marquez sat down and poured his heart and soul into writing a story that was really an imitation of it, as a way of honoring Kafka, right? And being a young student, he takes his story and he trots on down to the newspaper office and puts the envelope on the desk and runs away and thinks, let's see if it gets published. And it did. And I want to read you in his words. I've edited it down a little bit, but I want to read you in his words what he said about that experience. He said, and so I read my story, my very first story, in print. I read it in a single breath, hiding in my room, my heart pounding. In each line, I discovered the crushing power of print for what I had constructed with so much love and pain as a humble imitation of a universal genius was revealed to me as an obscure, weak monologue, barely sustained by 3 or 4 consolatory sentences. Any writers, musicians, artists in the room can relate to that experience. Yeah. Almost 20 years went by before I dared to read it a second time, and my judgment then, untempered by compassion, was even less indulgent. He said the most difficult thing was the avalanche of friends who invaded my room with copies of the newspaper and glowing praise for a story I was sure they had not understood. Amid my fellow students at the university, some appreciated it, others were puzzled by it, and others, with more reason, did not read past the 4th line. My greatest uneasiness had to do with the verdict of the intellectual Jorge Alvaro Espinosa, whose critical blade was dangerous even beyond our immediate circle. I had contradictory feelings. I wanted to see him right away to resolve my uncertainty once and for all, but at the same time, the idea of facing him terrified me. When I saw him, he began talking to me not about the story, but about my audacity. I suppose you realize the trouble you got yourself into, he said. Now you're in the showcase of recognized writers, and there's a lot you have to do to deserve it. His was almost the only opinion that could affect me, and I was petrified. But before he finished speaking, I decided to preempt him with what I considered then, and have always considered since, to be the truth. That story is terrible. He explained that even if it was as bad as I said, it was not bad enough for me to sacrifice the golden opportunity that life was offering me. In any case, that story already belongs in the past, he said. What matters now is the next one. In any case, that story already belongs in the past. What matters now is the next one. My friends, what if we saw the stories of our life in this way? What if, for every story that is holding us back, for every tale we rehearse in pain, for every single past mistake that we punish ourselves or each other for, what if we were able to come to a place where we are able to say, that story already belongs in the past. What matters now is the next one. This is where the forgiveness work that Reverend Shannon taught us last week is so, so powerful. Remember, she said forgiveness is a courageous act of self-love. Forgiveness is a courageous act of self-love. Forgiveness rewrites the story. It doesn't change what happened, y'all. It changes your experience of what happened. And when you change your experience of what happened, you are suddenly in power. You are suddenly in the driver's seat. That thing that happened no longer happened to you. It happened for you. Forgiveness rewrites the story. Forgiveness puts you in control of your experience of the past. And you get to decide your new ending. How glorious is that? What if you decided to write a new story from a place of empowerment? How do you do that? If I felt empowered, what would I do next? You can't change the past. I remember years ago hearing, and I don't know if Oprah was quoting someone, but I remember Oprah said, forgiveness doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It means giving up the hope that it could have happened differently. So if you give up that hope that it could have happened differently because it didn't, then suddenly you are empowered to decide what it means for you now. And you are empowered to decide what comes next. I want to bring it back by reminding you that power, money, intimate relationships, all of this is inexplicably bound up together. So that means that when you do this work around power, you are setting a standard up here for all of your financial relationships, your intimate relationships will rise up to meet that. How glorious is that? You heal one, you heal them all. Everything will begin to resonate with a new, more empowered you. How glorious is that? That story already belongs in the past. What matters is the one that comes next. Brian, will you come up here for a second? Do you remember? Brian just did this incredible song called One Power. One power. What if you believed that there is one power, that it is everywhere present, that it is the power of love embodied as you, as me? What if you believed that that one infinite power, that you were the focus point of that? That you were the portal for that? That power is living you and breathing you and beating your heart and batting your eyelashes and loving every bit of you at the same time. What if you believed that you were one with power? What would you do? What would you do differently? Who would you love differently? How would you show up to help our brothers and sisters who are in pain differently?